The America's Democrats podcast, a project of 21st Century Democrats, is made possible by contributions from our listeners. Want to do more? Go to americasdemocrats.org and click Donate. And thank you for allowing us to be your voice. And if you enjoy the show, please share it with your friends on Facebook and Twitter, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. This is the America's Democrats podcast, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. This week, the Third Way's Jim Kessler argues for a broad path to victory that includes mainstream centrism. Roger Hickey of the Campaign for America's Future on the grassroots movement for a progressive agenda that is reviving Democratic politics. Plus, Brittany Shepherd joins the Bill Press Show to decode the meeting between Kanye West and Donald Trump. Had enough of Fox News, the House Freedom Caucus, and Donald Trump? If you want the facts that you won't get from them or from the fake news sites of the alt-right, then stay tuned. Our sponsor, 21st Century Democrats, works hard to get everyday Democrats involved in returning our party to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Sit back and listen, then stand up and fight. And follow 21st Century Democrats on Facebook for all the latest progressive news. We're glad you can join us. Third Way is a national think tank that advocates center-left ideas in politics. Co-founder Jim Kessler says that centrist success in the primaries is one of the underreported stories this election season. And we say hello to Jim Kessler, Senior Vice President for Policy at Third Way. Jim Kessler, thank you so much for joining us today on the America's Democrats podcast.
Wonderful to be here once again.
Yes, it is nice to speak with you again, as always. And, you know, as a matter of fact, it's been about a year since we've had you on the program. And I think it's safe to say much has changed. The nation is unfortunately divided in ways that I don't know that we would have imagined even just a year ago. What does such entrenched polarization mean for a centrist agenda? And does it make it more difficult for politicians to find that third way?
Yeah, I think polarization is what fuels Donald Trump. You know, I think that's something that he wants. He wants to divide the country, and that's one of his strategies. It's not good for America, and it's not good for the world. Look, I think there's a hunger for something different. I've been around the country quite a bit. I've talked to voters. We've done polling. We've talked to a lot of elected officials. The truth of the matter is that 80% of this country agrees on the solutions to 80% of the problems facing this country. And, you know, there needs to be a voice out there. It's got to be bold. It's got to be dynamic. We've got big problems in this country. But, you know, there's definitely a place for a modern, bold, you know, opportunity Democratic centrist out there to excite the imagination and to bring the nation together, I believe.
Well, and of course, much of the partisan noise comes from the politicians themselves, especially from the White House, as you pointed out. Is it your sense that these tribal sentiments reflect the public sentiment as well?
Well, you know, definitely you're getting it from the White House. And, you know, as I just noted, this is a strategy that they have. They feel that this helps the president. We've never had a president before who thought dividing the country is what makes America stronger, and then, you know, or at least him personally stronger. And then you can understand the reaction on the left and also in the center, you know, things like separating kids from their parents at the border. Like, that is outrageous. It's going to inflame emotions, and justifiably so. There also is, and this is a term that Tim Dixon, who is from the United Kingdom, but he's done a lot of public opinion polling in America. He's called the exhausted middle, which is over 50% of the country that is just so tired of the polarization and want to exhale again, you know, and want some sense of normalcy, realizing that the country has big problems to solve and just feels like, you know, they want a voice in this too.
And the apathy that comes with all that too. I mean, there's that side of it as well, which is a little discouraging, especially as we move closer to November. You know, another change we have seen since we last spoke with you is the rise of boldly progressive candidates, many advocating a democratic socialist agenda. Some on the left see this as a sign that centrism is on its last legs. How do you respond to that?
So that's a great question, and this is one of the places where I feel most heartened, actually. So we have, you know, earlier in September, we concluded the primary season. All 50 states voted, some for governor's primaries, some for Senate primaries, and all for House races as well. And 21 million people cast ballots in Democratic primaries across America. And there were some notable exceptions, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in Queens being a very far-left candidate who won. But most of the candidates who won Democratic primaries throughout the country were more mainstream centrist candidates. It was really a strong performance by the centrist element of the Democratic Party. And let me give you an example. The new Democrats, and they are the moderates in the House, they endorsed 37 candidates in contested primary races this year for the House, and 32 of their candidates won. Bernie Sanders' organization, Our Revolution, about 30% of their candidates won. So 86% for the New Dems, 30% for Bernie's candidates. It's not getting a ton of media attention, but 21 million voters can't be wrong. They chose mainstream, moderate, centrist candidates in this primary election. I'm very heartened by that.
We're speaking with Jim Kessler, Senior Vice President for Policy at Third Way. And Jim, without advocating for intra-party warfare, what do you see as the main points of difference between the Democratic Party's centrist and more leftist impulses?
Yeah, so let me talk first about what we have in common. And it's a couple of things. One is very, very strong opposition to Donald Trump and his policies and Trumpism. And second is a belief that the Democratic Party is stronger when it has a diversity, sort of a racial and ethnic diversity of candidates, and also, young people as well as middle age and old. So there's a lot of commonalities. Our view in the centrist wing is we need a broad path to winning majorities. If you want to save the Democratic Party, if you want to rid the nation of Trumpism, there needs to be a broad path. And what works in the Bronx is not going to work in central Illinois or in much of the heartland. One of the main differences is how we look at the economy. So our view is, our belief is that Democrats should be opportunity Democrats, fighting so that everyone everywhere has the opportunity to earn a good life in this digital age. And really, it's like, how do you make this economy work through the technological changes and the globalization changes? And, the Democratic Socialists, their belief is, look, this economy is never going to work for people. It's time to give up on it. It's time to really give up on capitalism altogether. And, let's just give away things free. Let's give away free health care. Let's make college free. Let's, have free jobs, a guaranteed job. Let's just decide we're going to raise wages, minimum wages very, very high, and really give up on an entrepreneurial economy. And our view is that just isn't going to work.
Whatever happens on November 6th, it's very possible that Congress will have several new members that represent what is being called the progressive insurgency. While the third way often means how Democrats and Republicans can find common ground, how can Democrats themselves find common ground?
That'll be a challenge for Democrats, because let's just fast forward to the morning of November 7th, and I'm knocking on wood right now. Democrats have regained control of the House. And let's say they picked up 35 or so seats, and they've got 225, 230 House members there instead of the, roughly 190 we have now. Those new members, the seats that we're going to pick up, invariably, they're going to be far more centrist than the existing caucus, because we're moving from our cobalt blue districts into these purple and red districts. And those new members are going to be a larger part of the Democratic caucus, and they're going to want a voice too. So the key is that we have to accommodate these new voices. And if it's a party of litmus tests that says, look, you've got to be for single payer and Medicare for all, and if you're for universal health care through the expansion of Obamacare, you don't belong in this party, we're going to be in big trouble. So part of being a centrist is realizing that the party has broad diversity of ideology, and we have to embrace that. We can't just be the litmus test party, or else we're going to lose our majorities right away. I have hope that we're going to be able to do that, and the 2020 presidential election that begins the day after the midterms happened, that's going to determine, to a certain extent, the direction that the party goes. And I would not be surprised if ultimately the 2020 nominee represents, is someone who represents more the centrist wing of the Democratic Party, that opportunity wing, than the far left socialist wing.
How confident are you heading in to November 6th?
I'm very confident about the House. I am less confident about the Senate. I do think if you look at polling, we're doing very well in a whole series of seats that Democrats need to win. And, Republicans are back on their heels. It has not been a good election cycle for them. And I believe that, a series of factors are going to hurt Republicans, and one is the women's vote. The women's vote, I expect to come out very, very highly for Democrats. And if you look at the primary election thus far, Democratic turnout was very, very high. More Democrats turned out than Republicans by a margin of, about 53 to 47%. And if that continues, Democrats will definitely retake the House. The Senate, a tougher map, tougher states. I think that's more of a long shot in the realm of possibilities, but just in the realm of possibilities.
Jim Kessler, Senior Vice President for Policy at Third Way, joining us today on the America's Democrats podcast. Jim, as always, we appreciate your time with us. We look forward to speaking with you again soon, and hopefully we're talking about nice, happy things on November 7th and beyond.
Me too. Thanks for having me on, and looking forward to a really good election day, not a really bad election day like the one that I've blacked out from last time.
We try and forget it every day. Thanks,
we do.
Jim. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And this is the America's Democrats podcast, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen to this americasdemocrats.org podcast, a project of 21st Century Democrats. But we need you to stand up and fight. Do you want to get involved and help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box? You can make your contribution to help us keep this show going and to elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page.
This Social Security measure, I believe that we must pass legislation to provide medical care.
This is our tradition. When our grandparents came to America, it was the Democratic Party which said, welcome. It was the Democratic Party, the party of Roosevelt and Truman and Kennedy and others, who said that America belonged to all its people, not just a handful of the rich or a few giant corporations. That's why great leaders like FDR fought so hard for Social Security, and why JFK stood up to the insurance companies and their Republican allies to get Medicare. It's not just one thing, or one time, in one place. It's about a whole history of standing up to the Republicans and saying someone has to be on the side of regular working people in America, whether it's defending Social Security or just the way your loved ones are treated on the job. That's what the Democratic Party is all about. And that's why this message has been brought to you by the Democratic Party. Working people like you and me.
Paid for by 21st Century Democrats. Not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. This is the America's Democrats podcast, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. Coming up next, Roger Hickey tells us how a bold progressive call for change is driving success for the Democratic Party. But first, we turn to Jim Hightower, America's #1 populist, for his common sense commentary.
At last, November 6th is coming. Time to vote. Let's all join the majestic panorama of democracy in action. Well, calling America's electoral process majestic is overdoing it, for millions of our citizens will not be allowed to vote. That's because a consortium of national, state, and local officials of Republican persuasion, along with their corporate ringleaders, have mounted a tawdry campaign over the past decade to slam the ballot box shut on entire segments of America's electorate. In a concerted effort, These rabidly partisan officials have targeted African Americans, students, Latinos, the elderly, union households, the poor, immigrants, and other communities of qualified voters to shoo them away on Election Day. Why? Because such citizens tend to vote for Democrats and progressive ballot initiatives. So the GOP's grand strategy is not to win by getting the most votes, but to keep from losing by aggressively and shamefully shutting out millions of Americans who might vote against their plutocratic, autocratic, kleptocratic candidates and agenda. Consider voting day itself. It's a Tuesday, a work day, automatically eliminating people working 2 or 3 jobs who can't afford to take off a couple of hours or more to get to the polls and wait in line to vote. Move elections to weekends, make it a holiday, vote by mail, make democracy easy. This is Jim Hightower saying, instead, in a depraved anti-democratic grab for partisan gain, Republican officials have frenetically been planting thick briar patches of ridiculous rules, logistical barriers, intimidation tactics, ballot deceptions, and outright voter bans in targeted precincts across the country. These thugs are stealing the people's most valuable civic property, our votes. Shouldn't they at least have to wear ski masks on Election Day so everyone can see who's doing this to us?
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
This is the America's Democrats podcast, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. The Campaign for America's Future calls itself the Strategy Center for the Progressive Movement. Co-founder Roger Hickey says that people all over the country are energized by new ideas that call for economic and social justice. And we say hello to Roger Hickey, co-founder and co-director of the Campaign for America's Future. Roger, thanks for joining us today on the America's Democrats podcast.
Good to be with you guys.
Nice to have you back with us again. And, you know, the last time we had you on, Roger, it was to talk about your 11-point economic plan called Pledge to Fight for America's Future. Remind us about the plan and give us an update on its progress.
Well, we have always been part since Trump took over the White House. We have been always part of the resistance movement that has been pointing out the wrong directions that Trump and the Republicans have been taking in a wide variety of arenas. We've been opposing the bad stuff that they have been doing. Some of it very, very bad. But we've also made the point that it's not enough to be in the resistance. It's not enough to say no. You also have to have an agenda for change for voters, and that's what we tried to do with this pledge to fight for good jobs, sustainable prosperity, and economic justice. And as part of that, we have an 11-point program that we can talk about to revive the American economy and create economic justice for all.
Let's look ahead to November. What do you see as some of the most encouraging news for progressives?
Well, I think the most important thing is that from the very beginning, people have been wise to Trump and realized that we didn't fight hard enough in the presidential year, and so people all over the country are energized and devoted to getting people out to vote, and that's the most important period thing to do between now and the election. So there is a huge ferment of activity among both rank and file Democrats, independents, even some Republicans, and also among new people who are running for office around the country. And many of them are testing out some of these ideas as these candidates go in a new way to talk about the future of the country.
What are some of the ideas and concerns that are driving the early success of progressive candidates?
Well, one clear example is Trump's attacks on health care. This is a really crucial issue, and over the last 2 years, people have realized that Trump, in so many areas, has been just like the Republican establishment. He has successfully cut taxes and then come back, taxes for the wealthy, not for you and me. And then he's come back to the Congress and said, all right, now we have to cut Social Security, we've got to cut Medicare, we've got to cut Medicaid, and we've got to continue this war against what we've called Obamacare. So people realize that means it's going to be a worse and more chaotic and more private sector healthcare system, and that's motivating a whole lot of people. You see a whole lot of candidates talking about preserving Social Security, preserving Medicare, and the tax cuts, amazingly, have been very, very unpopular. People get it. Voters get it, that these tax cuts were for the wealthy, for the big corporations, and the corporations aren't even sharing that windfall with their workers. So we see healthcare and the tax issue becoming huge motivators for people to come out to vote. Obviously, women's issues, from the recent Supreme Court battle to things that have to do with women's economic equality, right to choose, etc. Those are motivating a huge new generation of women to run for office and to get out and work for candidates. And so if you run down our 11 points, jobs for all, invest in a green economy, empower workers, justice for all, anti-racism, a global economic strategy for working people, corporations and wealthy pay their fair share, close the Wall Street casino, and democracy, revive democracy and make it easier for people to vote and run for office. These are the kinds of issues that candidates are talking about, and a really revived grassroots democracy, grassroots activism is forcing the candidates to talk about.
We're speaking with Roger Hickey, co-founder and co-director of the Campaign for America's Future. Roger, if the Democrats do win back the House, your plan could be seen as a mandate. Do you believe Democrats will be effective in acting on it?
Yeah, listen, I don't want to jinx anything. We should all knock on wood. We should all make sure that we don't take this for granted and get out there and work between now and November. But if the Democrats do take back the House or even the House and Senate, there's going to be a whole lot of new members of the Progressive Caucus, newly elected people who are very progressive. There's going to be a lot of progressive Democrats heading up committee chairmanships in the House. And certainly we will be ready and able to put new ideas on the table in the form of legislation that will draw a distinction between the progressive Democrats and Republicans who, for example, just on the issue of drug prices, Trump once upon a time talked about skyrocketing drug prices. There's now several pieces of legislation in the works from the Democrats to lower drug prices, crucial element in healthcare. We will be able to do that kind of legislation and force that kind of debate, even if we don't have the votes to pass it in the Senate, which I hope we will. And so we will have the initiative again. We will have the ability to promote new ideas, as well as the investigative powers to look at what the Trump administration has been doing.
What sorts of things is your organization doing to make sure newly elected Democrats do in fact act on a progressive mandate?
Well, it's a complicated process. We've distributed our agenda widely to candidates, but we did not want to make these items, these particular 11 items, litmus tests where Democrats say, we won't support you if you don't support all 11. We encouraged candidates to talk about these issues where they were comfortable with it. And most of all, we encouraged grassroots groups who are working with candidacies all over the country to use this agenda both as a contrast to the failure of the Republican Party. Whatever happened to Trump's investment in infrastructure and creating jobs that way? It's gone. It's gone because they cut taxes instead. And also those grassroots groups who are working in the districts where these races are being held, they are the ones that are most able to talk to the candidates and say, look, here's the way you talk about jobs for all. Here's the way you talk about women's economic equality. Here's the way you talk about shared economic security. So it's been a variety of different ways, mostly bubbling up from the grassroots.
Now, in the wake of the Kavanaugh confirmation, America is an ever more divided nation, sadly. What does that mean for the ability of progressives to be effective?
Well, I think the grassroots of the Democratic Party, the ones who see themselves as activists, are very motivated. The young people, women, African Americans, and Hispanics, those base voters, as you might call them, are very, very motivated, not only in reaction to all of the bad stuff that Trump has done, not only in response to this horrific process of forcing Kavanaugh through to the Supreme Court. So I think it's a matter of keeping up the momentum with those groups. And in addition, I think that it's important to talk to Trump voters as well. There's a lot of Trump voters who they didn't like Hillary. They wanted to throw a stink bomb into the political system. And a lot of those people voted for Obama. They want to see candidates who fight for them and fight for the middle class. And they're starting to realize that Trump talked a good game, but he's failing on a whole lot of areas, like the infrastructure investment. It's non-existent. He's still working for the very wealthy and the corporations. That's his agenda, and so I think there's on all levels we have organized efforts to get people energized and inspired about not only stopping Trump, but taking over the political system once again and moving real change. That's our job between now and November 6th.
And speaking of between now and November 6th, what can be done to continue to build that progressive surge on Election Day?
It's important that big, inspiring candidacies like Beto O'Rourke in Texas get a lot of visibility. Whether they win or lose, they are exciting the base. So candidates can lead. But I think most importantly is that you see it in the wake of Kavanaugh, a whole lot of organizations that have been focused on the Congress are now focused on winning a new Congress and also taking over the Democratic Party in the states in the process. So between now and November, we've just got to talk to our neighbors. We've got to organize systematically to make sure that people are registered to vote, to make sure that people are offered a way to get to the polls. Now is the time for the mechanics of winning an election, and it really helps if people are given a vision of what they might accomplish if the Congress changes hands. It's not just a political football. It's really our future that we're fighting for. So it's a combination of the mechanics of winning elections and inspiring people to be part of the process.
Amen to that. Roger Hickey, co-founder and co-director of the Campaign for America's Future, joining us today on the America's Democrats podcast. Roger, as always, we appreciate your time with us and do look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thank you, Jim, and everybody should get out and vote.
Absolutely. This is the America's Democrats podcast, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Make your contribution to keep the americasdemocrats.org podcast, a project of 21st Century Democrats, on the air, and help elect stand-up Democrats. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is the America's Democrats podcast, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. And now Brittany Shepherd of the Washingtonian joins Peter Ogburn of the Bill Press Show to explain why Donald Trump has a soft spot for Kanye West and what it's like to be one of the few African-American reporters in the Washington press corps.
Our good friend Brittany Shepherd from Washingtonian Magazine. Hi, Brittany. How are you?
I am good. I am all out of drag energy this morning. I am running on empty, but I'm so happy to be here.
We were talking earlier. I don't know how to feel about the Kanye-Trump summit because I feel so many different ways about it.
I have felt every emotion, I think, in the last 24 hours. Yeah, I mean, I was at the White House from about 9 a.m., all the way to like 6 p.m. yesterday, just trying to process all of my thoughts and feelings and also catch up with him at every turn.
I was annoyed. I was entertained.
Horrified.
Nah,
Disappointed.
I won't say disappointed because I didn't expect anything better out of these two. Like, it's not like they fell below my expectations. Like, this is exactly what I thought.
Yeah.
We were going to get.
I think it shattered many people's expectations, too, because even a lot of other reporters didn't even know who Kanye West was, which was surprising to me.
I'm sorry.
Yes. There was is it Kanye or Kanye?
This is Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
I completely believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So people were like, oh, well, they're going to talk about music modernization, which is why Orrin Hatch and members of the Doobie Brothers were there just hours before.
And Mike Love from the Beach Boys,
yeah.
who is insane, by the way. Did you see? I meant to pull this clip. He went on this whole thing about how Donald Trump tried to help get Whitney Houston off of crack.
Yeah, and we were very confused. I had no idea how Donald Trump and Whitney Houston were ever connected.
But you know what, though? Could have very well happened.
Sure.
Because that's where that is where Donald Trump lives. He lives in that space of like celebrity, not politician.
And sobriety, I suppose.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I could totally see that happening. But, like, I saw Mike Love, who's a maniac. Jeff Skunk Baxter was there, wearing a suit for the first time, maybe ever, right? From the Doobie Brothers. Mm-hmm. It's like all my dad's favorite music. Who else was there? Oh, Kid Rock.
Oh, Kid Rock was there.
Kid Rock walked into the White House yesterday.
Yeah, one of my colleagues asked him if he thought that Trump should fire Jeff Sessions, and he goes, fire you, and then walks into the White House.
This is not Kid Rock's first visit to the White House, though. Do you remember when he took a picture with the First Lady portrait of Hillary, and he was scowling with Palin?
Yeah,
by
him and Palin and Sweaty Teddy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sweaty Teddy was there, Ted Nugent.
And didn't he flip off the photo?
There was a middle finger happening there as well.
Remember when he briefly floated a run for office?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he had a website and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Which was all just a giant scam. I can't believe I'm going to ask you this question, Brittany.
Okay, I'm ready.
How serious of a meeting did Donald Trump and Kanye West have? Because they did get into some issues. Can I play a clip of the violence in Chicago, right? This was one of the issues that they talked about.
The numbers of people being shot and killed, and it's not for this country. So they have to do something, and I am totally open. If we can do it a different way, Kanye, I'm totally open.
If we can do it a different way, Kanye, you, a rapper, please tell me how we can do this. How serious was this meeting?
I would say I take both Kanye seriously and literally, and I think Trump does too. And one of the only reasons I say that is because I think Trump listens to people who are like him, who appreciate him, and who are from his world. And what better couple than Kim Kardashian West and Kanye West? And look, Kim walked in there, pleaded for clemency for Alice Marie Johnson, and guess what? Like weeks later, she was out and she was free. Yeah. So if anyone could be an earworm to the president, it's going to be Kanye West. So I took everything he said with both a grain of salt and all the seriousness in the world, because in that closed-door caprese salad lunch, if Kanye offered something that would go against, say, Jeff Sessions' policy on stop and frisk in big cities like Chicago and New York, I would say that Trump would consider it seriously.
Trump would be way more open to hearing from Kanye West than like Elizabeth Warren.
Well, especially
or even Jeff Sessions.
Well, yeah, especially when you're in administration when there's no black senior staffers. Like, he's not going to turn to Ben Carson and ask him what to do. Right. Ben Carson's not even turn to himself and ask himself what to do.
Ben Carson can't even figure out how to work his microwave. Like,
it's just he's not talking to the president about these issues in the way the president likes to be talked to.
Yeah.
No, and Kanye will.
That's a really good point, actually. I mean, it's also a scary point, but but I think it's an interesting point. Donald Trump, this is where he lives. This is where he's happiest.
Absolutely.
Being surrounded by celebrities
who like him.
Yeah. Yes, fair.
Yeah, and so it was just like with any other negotiation, at the end of the day, he's a businessman and likes to do deals on his own terms. Yeah. And Kanye West doesn't really live in the realm of anyone's terms, so he's easy to bend towards Trump's will.
So I want to be very clear. I'm not making light of the situation. I'm not trying to make a joke. I honestly think that both of these men have serious mental health problems, truly. And to watch them both in the Oval Office talk about pressing issues of the day is a little horrifying. It's a little horrifying.
Especially with Kanye, who's been very public. I'm not really sure what's happening with the president and his health. But for Kanye, someone who I've been following personally as a fan and a lover of pop culture forever, his last album was titled, I Am Bipolar. Yeah. And then during the meetings, so that he wasn't bipolar, he was just sleep deprived.
Yeah, that was so weird.
Yeah, it was just very Trumpian. It felt like it was a mini Trump stump speech in Iowa, and the way that he was like free jazzing on all of these subjects.
I mean, again, to come out and admit publicly that you are bipolar, and then to say, "Oh, I'm just tired. I'm not bipolar." It's a little bipolar.
Yeah, and there was lots
again, I'm not making light of it. It's like there's something going on there.
It was very confusing for a lot of us, and the way he would riff from topic to topic, it felt very presidential, or what the new normal of presidential is.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
I mean, people can be scared, people can be enthused. He was hanging out with Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens after he was at the White House, and they were very jazzed to see what's happening. So people, I think, can pick the emotion that they want to feel out of it because it ran the gamut.
I want to play this clip again because this was, I think, one of the more underreported parts of the meeting, aside from like, hey, we now know Kanye's passcode to his phone, to all like the big like hug, the photo op hug, where Kanye talked about why he couldn't vote for Hillary Clinton.
My dad and my mom separated, so I didn't have a lot of male energy in my home, and also I'm married to a family that, not a lot of male energy going on. It's beautiful, though. But there's times where, it's something about, I love Hillary. I love everyone, right? But the campaign, I'm with her, just didn't make me feel as a guy that didn't get to see my dad all the time, like a guy that could play catch with his son. It was something about when I put this hat on, it made me feel like Superman.
So, again, saying the quiet part loud, right? Mm-hmm. He's saying what we have all known to be true, that one of the reasons that Hillary Clinton lost the election, there are many, one of the reasons is that there were plenty of men who just could not bring themselves to vote for a woman.
Yes. And it kind of plays in this narrative of like a toxic masculinity or like the prison of masculinity, and it plays into, I would say, a pretty tricky narrative of, oh, I'm surrounded with femininity, I'm in an all-female family.
By the way, that part of the clip, by the way, the way I heard it is like, I come from, this family with a lot of females. I've got my nagging wife and her annoying sisters and her, loudmouth mother. I have to hear from them all the time, and I'm not going to take orders from them, and I'm damn sure not going to take it from a female president.
Yes, and it's super easy to read it into that way. And honestly, I think that there was an undercurrent of that in the implication where, I can't relate to this because as her. Yeah. Well, I mean, what did he want? What was the alternative for Mr. West? I'm with her and him and him and him and him and him and him. Like, I'm not sure what he wanted out of that. And it does play to a part of Trump's base that it really capitalized on like raw male energy, right? Like he wanted consequenceless actions. And, the Kardashian West clan is not going to put up with that. So he turned to Trump.
Did you you wrote a big piece before Trump came here or Kanye came here about where he might hang out in D.C.?
Yeah.
We know he hung out at the Apple Store. We're going to talk to Jack Jenkins, who was in the Apple Store with Kanye.
That's phenomenal.
He's going to be here in the next hour of the program, so you're going to want to get the whole story from Jack. Where did Kanye get? I assumed he would go to the Trump Hotel. Did he go to the Trump Hotel? Do we know?
Yeah, I was trying to use my Instagram detective skills, which I use for everything in my life.
As a good reporter does.
Right, of course. And originally I thought he was at the Trump International Hotel in this photo with Candace Owens and Charlie Kirk. But the carpets look like they could be the JW Marriott, which is also super close to the White House.
Oh, wow.
So I think it's one or the other. If he wasn't with his wife and he wasn't with his children, and I don't think Kim would be caught dead at the Trump International Hotel, that he would be there.
That's interesting, actually. Yeah. That might have been the thing if she was,
and she was here, I think they'd be at the Ritz or Mandarin Oriental.
Yeah.
But I think Trump International, though maybe not BLT steak.
Yeah, right. All right, so we've talked about this before. We did a whole podcast on this a couple months ago when Kanye originally started coming out and saying, "Make America Great Again."
Yeah, around April.
And all this stuff. Is it okay to like Kanye's music anymore?
What a great question. And something that a lot of fans, including myself, have to grapple with. Yeah. At what point is his messaging off color for a fan? And I think the answer is it depends on the person, right? And I think it's in a similar way. People are like, oh, well, can I like these comedians anymore? Can I like Aziz Ansari anymore after what happened with Babe.net or in a more severe way, Louis C.K.?
Yeah.
And as someone who has felt that his music has inspired me, I've my blackness has been more empowered through his music. Like I want to be there to support him. But if you don't do it critically, then what's the point?
Yeah.
Right. So I think a critical consumption is always okay. But once you lose your self-awareness, I don't know, man.
That's the thing. Like, I'm trying to figure out where the line is, because I listen to plenty of musicians that have some problematic, some real problems in their story, right? And there are plenty of actors who are phenomenal actors, phenomenal directors, that
marry their daughters.
Yeah. Like there are some. I won't see Woody Allen movies.
It's safe
anymore.
to say Woody Allen is canceled.
Yes,
yeah. No, I won't see.
I'm not a big Woody Allen fan.
No, he's canceled.
I will not see Woody Allen movies anymore. But he's made some fantastic movies. A lot of them are older. I don't know his recent movies really don't speak to me very much, and I haven't seen any in 15 years, right? But Annie Hall's a great movie. It's a great movie,
right?
So what do you do? How do you, it's a really tough spot to be in.
It is. It's tricky, and I don't think it's just the
and by
MAGA.
the way, I just want to say, Kanye West is just guilty of supporting, Donald Trump, who is a very, very bad person in my opinion, right? But he hasn't been accused of any of these other things that the people that we're talking about,
right?
Just to be clear.
But I can see the grappling with Kanye because he is saying stuff about black-on-black crime, which he riffed on yesterday, and how black people are abusing the welfare system, just things that are incorrect, and that his friends like Chance the Rapper are trying to course correct him on very publicly. So I can see that there can be an ethical dilemma there above the, he just likes Kanye. Kanye and Trump are just buddies.
Yeah.
Because that can change, with the flip of a coin.
I think that this is the subtext to all of this, and seeing Kanye West in the Oval Office yesterday there is a fear, I think, among a lot of people that the roles will be reversed at some point, that Kanye West will be sitting at the Resolute desk if he decides to run for president.
You know,
did that come up at all?
It did come up at all yesterday. Yeah. There was a question. He goes, not after 2024. So he's waiting for Trump to, finish his 2 terms. And then Kanye will suggest running for president. But I don't think it's going to happen, at least not in my lifetime.
You don't think?
I don't think so. Kanye is a lot of talk and very little walk when there has to be some fault. Also, I don't think Chris would allow that to happen. And Chris makes all the decisions in that family. Jenner.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, for our listeners who aren't plugged in on Keeping Up with the Kardashians. I don't watch
Keeping Up with the Kardashians.
Well, I do, so you don't have to.
Okay, all right. Yeah, that probably makes sense.
Yeah.
But oh boy.
Can you see Kanye in Iowa?
No, but
Look, could you see Trump sitting in the Oval Office?
That's kind of at every single turn that we talk about the 2020 stuff, or anybody running for office, right? Whether it's Mark Cuban, non-conventional people running for office, whether it's Mark Cuban or Kanye West, it's just or Michael Avenatti. It's well, stranger things have happened.
That is true. I'm not counting it out.
Yeah,
but I can see an Elon Musk presidency before I can see a Kanye West presidency, mostly because do you think someone's going to vote in another black person for president? I'm not so sure, at least in the next couple of years.
Yeah, that's depressing.
Yeah, it is, but it's something that you have to kind of.
No, but I'm not saying I disagree with you. It's just a depressing thought. I want to play one last clip from their meeting. Ray, this is the big hug that they had, which was, the photo up of this was absolutely amazing because again, Trump is behind the desk. Kanye is on the other side. Kanye gets up and comes around and gives Donald Trump this big old hug.
I love this guy right here.
Come here. That's really nice. And that's from the heart. I didn't want to put you in that position, but that's from the heart. Special guy.
Special guy.
We talked about this earlier.
Yeah.
So many emotions, and I have so many feelings about Donald Trump, but sometimes I just have to say, Donald Trump makes me laugh.
Oh, you have to be able to laugh,
right? Special guy. What a funny guy.
Thank you.
That's from the heart. That's from the heart.
And then Kanye turned around and hugged John Carl of ABC.
What was that?
Yeah, I think John Carl said, hey.
I love everybody.
Yeah, I love everybody. And Hillary, I love everybody. I think John Carl something to the degree of, oh, thank you for taking our questions. Some basic
Thank you, Mr. West.
Yes. And then he came over and he gave good old John a hug. So it was kind of a whirlwind day. Also, he cursed a lot. Apparently, that's what people are also worried about.
Okay, I have a take on this.
Yes, I do too.
If you're annoyed that Kanye West said MFer in the White House on camera, you probably have. If you think that's bad, wait till you hear the tapes of what Richard Nixon said in the Oval Office.
Right. And what's been probably done in the Oval Office.
What we know has been done under Bill Clinton in the Oval Office. I'm sure that Barack Obama said MFer in the Oval Office many times.
Yeah.
I'm sure Bill
Clinton
Clinton
ate his 6 almonds at night.
Yeah.
I know that George W. Bush, people have talked about George W. Bush.
Yeah.
I'm sure every president has. In fact, I would think that you were some sort of a robotic weirdo if you didn't.
Right. He was just, shooting from the hip. Like he usually does.
Yeah, I that really annoyed me. That
I don't like the pearl clutching. It
yeah.
Really
like someone was like, Kanye West just said this word in the Oval Office. It's like, oh, are you okay? Are you going to be all right?
It's just crazy. I'd rather, have him be cursing and have a press briefing.
Yeah. Yeah. So did Kim Kardashian West, did she say...
Either is okay, I'm sure.
I'm sure she goes away. Yeah. Did she have anything to say about this? She had no presence at all yesterday.
Not yesterday. And you know what? I think she's going to keep a low profile until she can come out and say, I'm very happy that my husband did XYZ. Because right now we don't really know what happened.
Yeah.
We're not really getting a lot of insight into the private conversation between him and Brown and Trump. But I can see Kim and Alice Marie Johnson maybe making a statement in the next couple of weeks.
This is totally unfair, but we only have about 90 seconds, and I wanted to ask you about a piece that you wrote last week about how you grapple with the lack of diversity.
Sure.
I thought it was such an important piece, and just to pull back the curtain a little bit, we book a lot of people on the show, and we book White House reporters on the show. Mm-hmm. Not a lot of diversity in the White House press corps.
Not a lot, no. There are, if you look at foreign pool, there's like a lot of Asian and Hispanic people, and that gives me hope that it will, move over to the regular people and the regular folk you see on TV all the time. But it's really tough. And I was trying to be as honest as possible that I could in my essay about how hard it was to be one of the only black people and one of the only people under 30 in the press corps. And it's hard to be taken seriously. Everyone who meets me in the administration, if I bring up my race, it's like an on-ramp to identity politics in their mind. And it's super difficult to source up. And I can't burn sources in the way that other people can. And if I tweet about racism or write a story about black voters and them, walking off the Trump train, then people stop answering my texts and my calls. Yeah. And that doesn't happen with, I'm not going to name names, but you just look on TV and look at the people who were there with the White House press corps.
A lot of white male faces in the White House press corps.
That's true.
And in media in general. Mm-hmm. I mean, pretty powerful drug, I got to tell you. But it's a really, really important piece. Go read Brittany's work, Washingtonian.com, Washingtonian.com.
That's all for the America's Democrats podcast. Thank you to all who made today's show possible. Jim Kessler, Roger Hickey, and the entire Bill Press team. And thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, please get involved in our efforts to keep this show going and to elect Democrats who are bringing the party back to its roots. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. And be sure to find 21st Century Democrats on Facebook and Twitter, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. For the America's Democrats podcast, I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Join us. Support the americasdemocrats.org podcast, a project of 21st Century Democrats, and help elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles with your contribution today. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page.